This is week 2 of front-end development with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. My name is Mildred, and I am your instructor for this course. Now, this week we are going to look at cascading style sheet. We are going to look at where and how to apply styles. We are also going to look at the different ways to apply colors and the different color values that we have. And then we are going to move on to look at the text and the font properties that we have and we can apply to different text in HTML. Now, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. CSS, within CSS, like this. And it is how we apply styles to HTML elements. HTML elements have their default styles and colors, and we can change these default styles and colors using Cascading Style Sheet. Now, CSS is written in 3 different places, or there are 3 different ways we can apply styles to an HTML element. The first way is to apply it inline using what we call attributes. So let's say I have a P element here. So I'll type the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And I'll close P. When I refresh my page, hold on, I have the text here and the default color is black. But with CSS, the first way we can apply this is by using inline styles. And when we say inline, we mean using the style attributes, written style like this, equal to, and a pair of quotes, either single quotes or double quotes. So you can write it in single quotes like this or in double quotes like this. So style is the attribute name, is equal to, and then in the pair of quotes, you want to put the style that you want to add to this. Now, to change the color of the text, we use the color attribute, or we use the color, the name of the property is called color, and then the value, let's say red, like this. And when we refresh our page, if all is well, the text will be in red. Now, this is not the best way to apply styles, but this is the way you apply a style to an element when you do not want styles to be changed by any style elsewhere. So if you have an external style sheet, you don't want the style on the external style sheet to be changed by you don't want this style to be changed by the external style sheet. You use inline style. Inline style has the highest priority, which means that no matter the style, if you have 10 styles for the P tag, the one inline is the one that will apply to that element. So again, this is called inline style. You apply it using the style attribute is equal to the name of the property and then the value of that property. To change the color of a text, the property name is color. Take note of the spelling. We have British and American spelling of color. We're using the American spelling of color. Now let's look at the other way we can apply. We can embed the style sheet in the head area using the style tag, like this. And then we close style. So everything within this style tag is going to apply on this page alone. So even if we have several pages, we are only going to get the style applied to this page. So the syntax for writing CSS is to specify the selector, written like this, a pair of curly braces, and then the name of the property, and then a colon, and then the value of that property. If you want to specify several properties and values, that's several style, you put a semicolon and keep listing properties and their value here. And so we are going to look at all the properties that we're going to be using. So when we say selector, this targets the HTML elements that we want to apply the style to. We have different types of selectors that we're going to look at shortly, but this is the syntax. So you have the selector here, a pair of curly braces, and within the curly brace, you want to have the name of the property and then the value for that property. So what we are going to focus on are the different properties that we have for CSS and the kind of values that they can take. So let's say, for instance, we don't want this style to be inline anymore. So I'll take out the style attribute, save this, refresh, and it's back to black. Now the selector here I want to use is the HTML element selector, which means I want to say apply style to the p tag. So my selector name is p, which is the p tag. And I want the property here to be the color, and I want the value of the color here to be red. So let's just apply the color red to the p tag, or let's say the color blue, like this. Save, and when I refresh, you'll see that the text is now in blue. So this is how we embed style on a style sheet. The other way we can do this is to use an external style sheet. External style sheet, which means that we have a file somewhere else that holds all of these styles, and then we reference the style here using the link tag. And we write the link tag like this: link rel equal to style sheet. Right? And then we have type is equal to text/css, and then we use the href is equal to, then we have the reference or the location of the file we want to add. So now let's look at how we can add a external style sheet. Let's say here we have a new file, and this file is called main, and the extension for cascading style sheet files is .css. So recall that we talked about extension in last week's lesson, where we have Word document as .docx, we have PDF files as .pdf, we have images file. If we have a PNG image, we have .png. Cascading style sheet is .css, html.html, or .htm. So we create a new file called main.css, and the file is here in the same directory. So next week we're going to look at directory structures, but now we are not going to complicate anything with that. So we have this new file called main.css. We want this to be the style sheet, and so on that page we're going to put the href is equal to main.css. That's the name of the file. And because we are not bothered about directories, we know that this main.css file is in the same directory with the index page, and we'll elaborate on directories next week. Now on this file, I can take out this style tag and decide that I want to put the style here for the p tag to be color, let's say green. So we have the element, the property, and the value. When I save this and I refresh, all is well. The text is now in green. So what I did here is I don't have any style on this file. I have put my style on an external file called main.css, and I use the link tag to specify the location of the file that holds all of the styles for the page. So external style sheet will be the way you want to use professionally most of the time, or for the majority of your styles, so that when you change your style on one file, it applies throughout the web application, instead of having them inline and you have to change the style at every point, which will not be the best. Any question before I go further? Is it clear for everyone? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. So when we talk about selectors, we have different types. What we just use is the HTML element selector, which means that we are writing the name of the HTML element here as a selector. We have a H1 tag here that gives us the heading, welcome to week 2. We can decide to put a style for the H1 tag. Let me put H1. And I want to set the color to be, let's say, red. And when I save this and I refresh, if all is well, the heading is red, the text is green. So these are using element selector, which specifies the name of the HTML element that we want to apply the style to. We have something we call the ID selector. This does not specify the name of the element, but we just give it a name that we want to have, and is a unique name. For instance, I want to have this style applied to several things, but I don't want it to apply to the heading H1 by default. The ID selector uses the number sign or the pound sign or the hash symbol, and then a name that you are going to specify. You can give it any name you want. You can say my style 1 or whatever style it is, or you say hash color red, any kind of name you want, or any name you want that will make you remember what the style holds or what you want to use the style for. But now, because this uses the ID selector, this does not apply the style anywhere. If you want to apply this style to any element or any part of the page or any container or whatever, you have to come to that page. Because we say it's the ID selector, you have to use an attribute called the ID attribute. So I'll come here and say ID is equal to, and then I'll specify the name that I have given it, which is color red. And I'm saying ID is equal to color red. When I save this and I refresh, I have the style applied back. But this time, not using the element selector, but using an ID selector. Okay? You can do exactly the same thing, but this time using the class selector. If it's a class, you use a dot, a full stop, whatever you call it, before the name. And when you do that, when you come to the style, you don't use the ID attribute, you use the class attribute like this. And the color will be applied. Let's change this to something called color green. And let's change the name here to color green. And change this color here to green. Save this and refresh, and we have it applied. So what's the difference between the ID selector and the class selector? Now, if you are going to be using the style for several elements on the page, you want to use the class selector. You can apply class to several elements, but ID is unique. It only applies to the first one it sees. ID is used for just one element. When you want to use ID attributes, it means that HTML is not going to apply anything you use with the ID attributes when it has more than one name. It has to be unique. So it will apply to the first one with the ID, and then it will not apply to the next. So if I have an ID of color green, and I have here ID to go to color green, it's only going to apply the style to one of these, not both, because ID has to be unique. And ID is always seen as unique. So when you want to apply the same thing to more than one, you have to use the class selector. Okay, so the ID attribute always enforces uniqueness to whatever you specify as the value for the ID attribute. With style, it might be a little different, but that's the general concept of ID attributes for HTML. We have something called the universal selector. Let's say we want to apply something to all of the HTML elements on the page. You just use the star or asterisk sign, and this asterisk sign applies to all HTML elements. Where this will be useful is when we start responsive design, when we are designing for mobile, and we want to set the responsiveness of the page. We use this universal selector to set the style that we want to apply to all elements on the page. Okay, and so when you use this asterisk, let's delete this and let's change this to let's say brown, for instance. Because I used the hash brown, the universal selector, it means all the elements are going to take the style, the color brown, because of the universal selector. So that's what is useful. Sometimes you have the style you want to apply to more than one element. Let's say I want the H1 tag and the P tag to have the color, let's say the color yellow, for instance. I will group the selectors with as a comma separated list in a pair of curly braces. Then I can say the color here is yellow. Save this and refresh, and I have everything in yellow because I have grouped the selector. So every time you have the elements you want to apply all the styles to, you group them as a comma separated list. So these are not the only types of selector we have. We're going to look at the other types in week 8. But for now, this is the basic that you need to know to start applying styles to your web page. Is there any question before we move to the next topic? Okay, so I'll take it that everybody understands. In CSS or in programming generally, you want to always leave a comment to yourself or to anybody, because the thing is, when you write code, sometimes you come back a year later and you forget the reasoning behind why you did things the way you did things. And sometimes you'll not be able to remember what you were doing or why you were doing it that way. Or you are working in a group as a team and you want other developers or other programmers to understand what it is that you are doing. You leave something we call comments with your code. It's a good practice to leave comments on your code. But in CSS, if we want to write comments, we use a /, an asterisk, and then we write the comments we want to write. Let's say group selector, and then we use asterisk and / to end the comment. What this does is it just exempts whatever you write between the / asterisk and the asterisk / from execution. So what will now happen is you can read this as a note to yourself, or anybody can read this as a note to see exactly what it is you are doing. So it's just like take comments like you are leaving notes at different parts of the code to explain what it is you are doing or what it is you want to do in the future. So you can leave to-do list on that part, or say, this is what I have done, but this is what I hope to do later. But you put them within these tags, the / asterisk, and then close with asterisk /, and everything will be executed from, will be exempted from execution that is placed within the start and end comment tags. So we've used the color property, which is used to apply color to a text. And we've not looked at the different values that a color can take. Using the color name is one of the ways we can specify colors, but it's not web safe all the time. And we have a variety of colors that we might not even know the names. We have other ways to specify colors, which is using hexadecimal values of the color. Hexadecimal value is written with an hash, and then 6 letters and digits is alphanumeric to specify the color name. Let's say, for instance, we want the color red. So we'll say FF0000, and this is going to convert this to red instead of writing the color name red. If we want blue, so the pattern is the first 2 Fs are for red, the next 2 are for green, and the next 2 are for blue. So the way we mix this with the different letters is what will produce the color. If I want blue, I'll turn this 1 to 0. I'll turn the blue on to FF, save this. No, that's green. And then when I refresh, it will be green. And then if I want blue, I can turn this off and put this on FF, and I get blue. You don't need to memorize this. You can always have a reference manual for the different hexadecimal values of different colors, or you can always Google it when you try to use color and see different colors and the hexadecimal values for you to be able to use the values. Nobody keeps this in their head. Okay? So hexadecimal values are 6. After a hash sign, we have 6 different letters and digits that will specify the color. So this is how we'll use the hexadecimal value. There's something we call the RGB value, which you're going to see most of the time. RGB, like this. And this is just similar to the hexadecimal. We just specify the value for red, for green, and for blue. And we have 255 color channel. So it will be 0 to 255, right? To control the different colors and their. I think we can also control the transparency using the alpha channel, but let's look at this. So for red is 255, we want the full color. 0, we don't want this, we don't want this. And so we're going to have the color red because we specify the full color, 255 for red. If we want it to be different, not full red, we can make 125. Maybe we'll get a lighter shade of red and it's almost like brown. If we want it to be, let's say 200. So this makes you control how light or dark the color is. But if you want to control how transparent or opaque, you use an A, which is the alpha channel, that has the channel from 0 to 1, where anything closer to 0 makes it fully transparent, and anything closer to 1 makes it fully opaque. So if I put 0 here, let's say 255, this is going to be very transparent, which is white and can't see it. But when I start going closer to 1, so let's say 0.4, we'll see that it's a lighter shade of red coming up. But when I go to 1, we'll get the full color red here. So we can use the alpha channel to control the transparency of the color, or how light or dark we want the color to be. Okay. We have something else that we can use to specify color values, which is the HSL. You will hardly ever find this. HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, where hue is the degree on the color wheel. And then we have the value of this, because it's degree, is 0 to 360, right? So when we have 0, we mean red, and 120, we mean green, and then when we say 240, we mean blue. And then saturation is the shade of gray in percentage. So we have 0 to 100%, and lightness is also how light or dark it is, and also takes value in percentage 0 to 100. So if we want to have like a value for HSL, let's say we have 0 here, and we'll put 100% here, and then let's say 50% here, and then we get the color. So what you will do is always have a reference manual for your favorite color to get what you want. So this gives us the red color. And if I want to change this to be, let's say we have 0 is red, 120 is green. So let me make it 120. And then I'll refresh. And I have the green, and then 240 is blue. And then refresh. So you can always have your favorite color values, or whatever color you find, you can research to find what the HSL or RGB or hexadecimal value is, if you know the color name. As with the RGB, we also have an alpha channel for this, which will also do the same thing to specify how light or dark we want it. The value is from 0 to 1, where anything closer to 0 makes it fully transparent, anything closer to 1 makes it fully opaque. So let's say we want this not to be the full color, we want it in between, a little lighter. So make it 0.5, refresh, use a lighter shade of the blue that we have. Do you have any question before we move to the next topic? Does everyone understand?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's look at the different text properties that we have. And when we say text properties, we mean properties that we can use to change how the text looks here. So in CSS, we have different types of properties. And for text, let's just focus on the P tag here. We have looked at the color property, and we've seen how to apply different colors. So we're going to skip that property, but color is one of the properties that we can apply to text to change the color of the text. We have a property called text align, like this. And what we use this to do is to set the horizontal alignment of the text. Horizontal means from left to right, right? And then we can have values like center, left, justify, right, or we inherit from a parent element. But if we want to align this to the center, you put text align center. Always take note of the spellings of this between British and American spelling. Make sure that you get the correct CSS spelling. If we do text align center, I refresh this, we're going to have the text aligned to the center. If you want it justified, you justify, and if you want it left or right, you use the value left or right. So you need to know the values that the properties take, and if you look at your course resource, you can see the different values. But what you need to take note of are the properties that exist, and then it will be easy for you to research the kind of values they can take and how the values make them look. So when you use text align, you set the horizontal alignment. If you want it left, right, center, justified, you use text align property. We also have another property that we can use, we call this the direction property. And the direction property changes the direction of the text. Let's look at what it does. Direction, written like this. The values that the direction property take are left to right, right to left, or it inherits from a parent element. I think the default value or the initial value is the left to right. If you don't specify direction, it goes from left to right. So if I put left to right, it's still going to look the same, like it's supposed to look left to right. But if I put right to left, then it's going to go from right to left, changing the direction like that. So this property, most of the time, is not used alone. There's another property we call Unicode BD like this. Let's see, Unicode. And this is mostly useful when we have bidirectional text on the page, and this has values of embed, normal, BD override, things like that. So when you use Unicode BD, use it along with the direction property to set how to handle bidirectional text on the page. So we'll not be able to illustrate this properly only if we have text with multiple directions, like we have a text that goes from left to right and the one from right to left, and then we use the values from this Unicode BD that can set how the text is handled. So we can actually use normal plain text, BD override. We can, the other values we have are isolate override, isolate, embed, like that. So we have BD override, save, refresh. We see how it changes the direction of the text. Okay, now it changes each of the letters. So you will, when you know what exists, you will know exactly when this is useful for you and when you want to use it. So you use the direction or the Unicode BD along with the direction most of the time. We have another property that we apply to text that we call the vertical align. And just like the name, it sets the vertical alignment of an element. And vertical alignment means top to bottom, right? And so the value we have are baseline, bottom, middle, sub, super, text bottom, text top, and that. So if we want to set the vertical alignment, let's say we want bottom, save this, refresh, and then it doesn't show us anything here because we just have one line of text here, but these are the values. Let's say vertical align. Let's use this middle. So this sets the alignment from top to bottom, but not from left to right. And you will find use cases where you need to use this, but most of the time, I think we use it mostly for images, when we have an image and then we have text, or we have a table and we want the text to be at the middle of the, you know, when you have a table and you have text in it and you want all the text to be at the center of each of the cell, things like that, or you have an image and you want to control how the image is aligned along with the text. Maybe it has a text beside it or a text that describes the caption. This is when vertical align will be useful, but we're going to look at all of the uses as we go deeper in the course. We have another one called the text decoration property. Now, text decoration is a shorthand for text decoration, line, style, thickness, but we can use one single shorthand, text decoration, to specify all of the different values. So we're going to do each of the value one after the other. So we'll have text decoration line, and this is used to indicate the type of line for the text. So if you want the line to be line through, or you want it to be underline, or you want it to be overline, let's do overline, and you see how this controls that. The line above, if you use line through, is going to go through the text like that. And so you're going to, so what you need to do is to know the properties and research the values that each property can take and how the value makes that style display. You can have text decoration style written like this, and this is going to set the style of the line you want. Let's say, so let's do text decoration line first. So So text decoration line we want is to be, let's say, overline. Text decoration style, let's say we want it to be, let's say we want a dotted line. And then when we refresh, we'll get the line dotted over it. If you don't want dotted, there are different ones, dash, wavy, let's say wavy. So reset the values for all of this and you get a wavy line above that. If you want to control the thickness also, we have something we call text decoration thickness. Written like this. And this will set the values either in percentage or in pixels of how thick you want it to be. Let's say I want it to be 2 pixels thick, and when I refresh here, I'll have it thicker. Set it to 5 pixels, is even higher, and then it's going to be even thicker and bigger line. So this sets the thickness of the text decoration line. We also have something called text decoration color. And this will set the color of the line. Let's say we want the line to be blue, for instance. And then we'll set the color as blue. Refresh, we'll have the line to be blue. Or you can use the shorthand text decoration. Instead of specifying all, you can use all as in one declaration. Let's say we want this to be line through this time. We want it to be line through. We want it to be wavy. We want it to be 5 pixels, and we want it to be blue. Or let's use it green this time. And then we don't need all of this. We use one text decoration, save. If all is well, the style didn't apply, so something is not right here. So we want this to be line through. I think when you are using the shorthand property of this, you have to specify them one after the other to know which one is the problem. So let's say line through and see if this goes through. And then we want to add the thickness, 2 pixels. See that? And now this is the problem. So we want to add the color to be red and refresh. Sorry. Line through, we want it to be, let's say, wavy. So you research all of this and see why when you want to specify them as a whole list, it doesn't go through. I'm sure that one of the values has to come before the other, and so I'll leave that for you to find out why the text decoration shorthand. I know we have to use the style, which is line through. We have to use the thickness. Let's say the thickness is 2 pixels next. And then we set the color red. And this is supposed to apply, but it doesn't apply. So you find out why it doesn't apply when you do this. Okay? So if we use underline to see, and it still does not apply when you have all the other values. So when you have this kind of problem, you just stick with using each of the values and skip the shorthand so you can have all of this stuff. But basically, when you have text decoration, it is a shorthand for line, thickness, style, color. Okay. We have another one called the text transform property. And when you do transform, text transform written like this, you want to set how it looks. If you say capitalize, the first letter of each word will be in uppercase. If you say lowercase, everything will be in lowercase. Uppercase, everything in uppercase, like that. So let's say we want to capitalize, and then this is going to make the first letter of each word here in uppercase letter. When you say uppercase, it's going to make everything in uppercase, lowercase in lowercase. We have another property we call text indent. And when you have the text indent property, you just specify the indentation of the first line. And before we do this, let's just have more lines here. So when we have text indent, we want to specify how much space will leave before the first line, like the beginning of a paragraph. Let's say, and is in pixels, 5 pixels. Later on, we are going to look at the different units of measurements that are accepted and what they mean. So when I do this, the first line is indented. If I want it 15 pixels, we can see the indentation even clearer, 15 pixels. So we use the text indent to control how much space we leave at the first line of a text. So we have letter spacing. When we use letter spacing, it's just for the space between letters. So if I do something like this, letter spacing, and I specify letter spacing to be, let's use 2 pixels, it will adjust the space between the letters here. And if I make it 5 pixels, it will adjust the space even more. And so this is what we use the letter spacing to do. We also have something called white space. And white space will set how white space within the element is handled like this. So we can use wrap, free wrap. We have other values: wrap, free wrap, normal, no wrap, all that. You need to have a text on the page and practice using the different values that they have. So what I would like you to do is to set to get all of these properties and research what values they can take and practice to see how each of these values changes the text on the page. Okay, we have something called text shadow. We use that to apply shadow to a text. And when we want to apply shadow, we set the value for the color. Let's say we want the color to be, we want a shadow on the text. Let's say on the H1 tag now. We want the color of the shadow to be red, for instance. We want the, so we set the value for the color, the X offset, the Y offset, and then the blur radius. So let's say we want it to be red. Let's do the offset first, 2 pixels, 2 pixels. So we do offset for X, offset for Y. Let's say the blur radius, let's make it 1 pixels, and then want the color to be red like this. Save this, refresh, and then we have a shadow here. The shadow is red, and then all these values we specify for it. So refer to your lesson resource and then the pre-recorded video to look at the different values in detail. And then you can also research the properties to find out the values and practice them to see how they apply. So these are all the properties we apply to the text. Well, most of them. I don't think there are more that we've not discussed, but if you research, you might find 1 or 2 that we have not discussed. But these are the majority of the properties that you're going to be using more frequently. So we also have properties that we call the font properties, and font properties just controls the font. So let's say we want to work on the font of the H1. We have a property called the font family, and the font family just specifies a list or the name for the font for a text. Let's say we want this to be cursive like this, or we want Times New Roman. Look, let's say I'll change this from cursive. Let's say I want my font, I think this is the spelling, and then we have let's say serif like this. And then when we refresh, we have that font applied, the spelling of new. So we have the font change. If we don't want the font, there are several fonts you can specify. So you can look at the different values for the font families or the group of the font families. Sometimes we have cursive, and then it makes the whole thing cursive based on the fonts you have selected. But we're going to look at this in detail as we go further. So this is cursive. We can also look at the font style, and the font style takes values like I think you change it to italic or oblique or normal. Let's look at font style, and let's say we want it to be italic. And when I refresh, it's going to be in italic. If I want the font size, I want to control how big it is, I can use font size, and then I want to set it to, we can use normal absolute values, like saying we want it to be extra small, large, extra large. Or we can use relative sizes, like we want it to be larger, smaller, relative to something. Or we can take length values in pixels or in EM. So let's say I want the size to be 18 pixels. So I want it larger than it is. And when I save and I refresh, no, it's even smaller than what it was before. So let's say the font size. Okay, we're using the H1 tag, which is already large. So I'll say 64 pixels, which will now make it larger than how it was before. Okay. We have a property we call the font variant property, and font variant just takes the value of small caps, and what it does is that it puts everything in uppercase later, but smaller than the usual uppercase, like this. So it's all going to be in uppercase, but the ones in uppercase will be larger, and the ones in lowercase will be in uppercase but smaller. And that's what the font variant does. We have something we call the font weight that we can use to control the boldness of the font. So we can say it's bold, bolder, lighter, normal, or we can specify values from 100 to 900 as we want. So if I want it to be, let's say, lighter, I'll use lighter, save, refresh, and then it will be lighter, like that. Or you can just use the font, which is the shorthand for all of these things we've specified. You use font, and then you can specify everything in one declaration. Let's say font, we want 0. Let's say we want 72 pixels. We want it to be serif, Georgia. We're specifying the font family. We want the font variants to be small caps, and then we want it to be bold. Maybe something like this. Save, refresh, and see how this applies. We have everything. I don't think this even applied at all. Between this and this, I don't think we're supposed to put a comma here. Small caps, bold, and let's see, no comma here. Save, refresh, and then it applies here. So when you specify all your values in one declaration, it's not going to be a comma separated list. You put a comma between, like in the font family, you can have more than one value. You put a comma between those ones, but every other values is going to be a space separated list. And this is the last topic for this week's lesson. I don't know, we can take questions now if anyone has questions. Anybody with questions? All right, if there's no question, this is where this lesson ends. Assignment 2 is due on Sunday. For those who have submitted, I think you would have gotten your grades already. For those who have not submitted, it's due this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, which will be like early morning for most of your regions, Monday morning. Sorry, someone has a question. Can you go ahead? Yeah, you can go ahead with your question. Yes, you can copy both the HTML and CSS into the document when you submit both code. So you copy your HTML code into the Microsoft Word, copy the CSS into the same document, and then save and submit. So you're copying both. Okay. All right, everyone. So I wish you a restful weekend and see you next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.